A mother weeps at her son's grave, unaware that he's watching her from the shadows. But if he's alive, then who lies in that grave? A story of love, betrayal, and truth reborn. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The cold wind swept across the small cemetery, carrying with it the scent of rain and wilted roses. A lonely figure knelt before a grey tombstone, her trembling hands tracing the engraved words, Ethan Collins, 2005 to 2024. Maria's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she whispered, "My boy, it's been 6 months and still I wake up expecting to hear your voice." Her words broke with every syllable, each one heavier than the last. The earth beneath her knees was damp, the world around her silent, except for the soft rustle of leaves. To her, the grave was not just stone and soil, it was the heart she had buried, but unseen by her, not far from where she wept. A young man stood hidden behind a cluster of tall oak trees. His clothes were worn, his face pale, and his eyes, deep and weary, were fixed on the woman before him. Ethan Collins was alive. He pressed his hand against the rough bark, struggling to breathe quietly. Watching his mother cry over his grave tore at every fibre of his being. He wanted to run to her, to tell her everything, to hold her as he once did, but he couldn't. Not yet. Too much was at stake. One wrong move, and the people who tried to end his life would discover he was still breathing. And then his mother would be next. The rain began to fall in gentle drops, clinging to Maria's dark hair and the edges of her shawl. She smiled faintly through her tears, lifting her face to the sky. "You loved the rain," she whispered. "You said it made the world clean again." Her voice cracked as she pressed a small knitted scarf against the grave. It was Ethan's favorite, one she had made for his birthday just a week before the accident. "I kept it safe," she murmured. Maybe you can feel it wherever you are." Ethan closed his eyes. He could almost hear her heartbeat in the silence. It was the same sound that had once comforted him as a child when nightmares filled his sleep. Now, standing in the shadows, he felt smaller than ever. 6 months earlier, everything had changed. Ethan was a rising software engineer, proud to have earned his position in a renowned Boston tech firm. He was brilliant, honest, and maybe too brave for his own good. One night, while reviewing a confidential database, he stumbled upon hidden ledgers, proof of embezzlement, money laundering, and something far darker. Shocked, he had gone to his immediate supervisor, unaware that his boss was part of the conspiracy. Within days, strange things began happening. His access revoked, threatening messages sent to his private email, and one chilling phone call that simply said, "Stop digging, Ethan, or your mother will pay the price." He didn't stop. He couldn't, and that's when the trap was set. The day of his death began like any other. Ethan was driving home when a black SUV appeared in his rearview mirror. He remembered the blinding headlights, the screech of tires, and then the crash. Metal screamed, glass shattered, and fire swallowed everything. When he woke, he was lying in a dark basement, his hands tied, his body bruised. 2 men stood nearby, one of them making a call. "It's done," he said coldly. "His mother identified the body. Nobody will ask questions." Ethan's blood ran cold. They had staged everything. Days blurred together after that. The men moved him from place to place, feeding him little, keeping him weak. But fate had other plans. On the 13th night, during a heavy storm, a lightning strike caused the old cabin where he was held to catch fire. In the chaos, Ethan managed to escape through a broken window and stumbled into the forest, wounded and half-conscious. That's when he met Sam. Sam was a retired war veteran, living quietly in a small cabin deep in the woods. He found Ethan collapsed near the creek and carried him home. When Ethan woke, he could barely speak, but he remembered whispering, "They think I'm dead." Sam didn't ask questions. He simply said, "Then stay that way, at least until you're strong enough to decide what comes next." Weeks turned into months. Under Sam's care, Ethan slowly healed, physically and mentally. But his mind was never at peace. He dreamed of his mother crying alone, visiting his grave. The thought of her mourning a son who was still alive was unbearable. "I have to see her," he told Sam one night, his voice heavy with emotion. The old man shook his head. "If you go back now, they'll find you. And if they find you, they'll find her." Still, Ethan couldn't stay away. Tonight he had come, just to see her once, to convince himself she was safe. But seeing her broken before his tombstone shattered him. She looked smaller, older, her once bright spirit dimmed by grief. Guilt twisted inside him. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered under his breath, a tear escaping down his cheek. "I'm sorry for making you believe I was gone." He took a step forward, instinct guiding him, but the sound of approaching footsteps froze him in place. A black car rolled up near the cemetery gates. From it stepped a tall man in a grey coat, his uncle Richard Collins. Ethan's jaw tightened. Richard had been his father's business partner, a man who had always smiled too easily and offered too much advice. Ethan's instincts screamed that he was part of this. And now he was here, laying fresh flowers on Ethan's grave, with a look of false sorrow. Maria stood and nodded to him weakly. "You didn't have to come every week, Richard," she said softly. "I know you have work," Richard gave her a sympathetic smile. "Your family, Maria. I'll always look after you." That's what Ethan would have wanted. Ethan clenched his fists. The audacity of those words made his blood boil. "You liar," he muttered under his breath. Every instinct told him that this man was the reason his life had been destroyed. But Maria, gentle, trusting Maria, had no idea. To her, Richard was the only one who hadn't abandoned her in her darkest hour. After a few minutes, Richard's phone rang. His tone changed as he turned away to answer. "Yes," he whispered. "She's still buying it." "No, he hasn't surfaced. Keep watching the Collins property just in case." Ethan's heart stopped. They were still watching his mother's house. It wasn't over. They were waiting for him to come back. Maria didn't notice. She was too busy picking up fallen petals from the wet grass. Richard ended the call and turned to her with a smile. "I'll drop by later," he said. "You shouldn't stay out here in this weather." She nodded, too tired to argue. When his car finally disappeared down the road, Ethan exhaled shakily. The rage inside him burned hotter than ever. His uncle was using his death to control his mother, and probably his inheritance too. Maria knelt one last time before the grave. "If you're watching from heaven, Ethan, just know your mother loves you more than life." Her voice broke as she kissed her fingertips and touched the tombstone. Then she slowly walked away, her steps unsteady on the wet ground. Ethan waited until she disappeared down the path before stepping out from behind the trees. The rain was falling harder now, soaking his clothes, but he didn't care. He knelt where she had been moments ago and ran his fingers across his own name carved in stone. "I'm here, Mom," he whispered. "I'm right here," the words caught in his throat. He saw the scarf she'd left behind and clutched it to his chest like a lifeline. It smelled faintly of lavender, the scent of home. He looked around one last time before turning back toward the forest. He knew what he had to do now. This wasn't over. His mother's pain, his stolen life, the lies, they all had to end. But before he could set things right, he needed answers. And the only man who had them was waiting for him in the woods. As Ethan disappeared into the rain, the wind carried Maria's last words through the cemetery. "If only I could see you once more, my boy." He stopped for a moment, looking back, eyes glistening. "You will, Mom," he whispered. "I promise." And with that, he vanished into the darkness, unaware that fate was already weaving a path that would bring both heartbreak and hope in ways neither of them could imagine. Night had swallowed the forest whole. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of pine and the soft crackle of a distant thunderstorm. Ethan trudged along the narrow path, his shoes sinking into the mud, every step echoing the ache inside him. The image of his mother's tear-streaked face wouldn't leave his mind. Each time he blinked, he saw her kneeling in the rain, whispering his name to a grave that held no body. It was a memory that cut deeper than any wound. By the time he reached the cabin, the storm had begun. Rain pounded against the wooden roof, lightning flared behind the hills, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Sam was sitting by the fire, sharpening an old hunting knife. His silver hair glinted in the flickering light, his posture calm but alert, as if he had been expecting Ethan. Without looking up, he said, You went back, didn't you? Ethan froze near the doorway. I had to see her, he admitted. She thinks I'm gone. She visits my grave every week. I couldn't stand it anymore. Sam sighed, setting the knife aside. And what if someone saw you? What if they followed you here? No one saw me, Ethan said quickly, though doubt crept into his voice. I stayed hidden. Sam rose from his chair, his weathered face illuminated by the firelight. You think that makes you safe? The men who wanted you dead, they're not amateurs. They have money, power, and patience. If they realize you're alive, they won't stop until they finish what they started. Ethan clenched his jaw, his frustration spilling over. So what do you expect me to do? Hide forever while my mother cries herself to sleep? Pretend I'm a ghost while they live off my father's company? No, I can't. Sam studied him in silence. Then slowly he nodded. If you're serious about fighting back, he said, then you need to understand what you're up against. Sit. Ethan sat by the fire, dripping wet and restless. Sam handed him a folded file, old, worn and sealed with a rubber band. Your father gave me this before he died, he said. He didn't trust Richard. Said if anything ever happened to the family, I'd know what to do. Ethan's eyes widened. You knew my father? Sam nodded. He was a good man. We served together years ago. When he started his company, he asked me to keep an eye on things from the sidelines. Said he didn't trust everyone around him. Ethan opened the file slowly, his hands trembling. Inside were papers, old contracts and photographs, some of them showing Richard with his father's business partner, Victor Hayes, the same man who had been Ethan's boss. In one photo, the two men were shaking hands at a private gala. Another showed a mysterious transaction report, millions of dollars, wired to an offshore account under a fake name. This, Ethan muttered, scanning the papers. This is proof. This is what they were hiding, Sam nodded grimly. And that's why they came after you. You found a piece of it, enough to make them nervous. They tried to erase you to protect themselves. Ethan stared into the fire, anger burning in his chest. So it's true. My uncle, my own blood, sold me out. There's more, Sam said. Richard's been controlling your mother's finances since the funeral. She doesn't know it, but he's been liquidating your father's shares and transferring assets overseas. Once it's done, he'll disappear, and she'll be left with nothing. Ethan's hand curled into a fist. I won't let him touch her. Sam watched him closely. Then you'll need to be smarter than him. You can't just walk into his office and accuse him. You need proof, real proof, and you'll only get that from his systems. Ethan met Sam's gaze. You mean hack him? The old man smirked faintly. You're the computer genius, aren't you? Make it count. For the next several hours, the cabin was filled with the soft hum of Ethan's laptop. Rain battered the windows as he typed furiously, his fingers dancing across the keys. Lines of code appeared, encrypted files unlocked, and one by one layers of deception peeled away. Sam stood behind him watching quietly, occasionally pouring him a cup of black coffee. Then, just past midnight, Ethan froze. Got it, he whispered. On the screen was a folder labeled Trust Estate Transfers. Inside were bank statements, digital signatures, and, most damning of all, emails between Richard and Victor. One read, the boy's mother believes the crash. Once we finalize the transfer, there'll be nothing left to trace. Keep an eye on her in case she gets suspicious. Ethan's stomach twisted. He's still watching her. He's keeping tabs on her every move. Sam leaned closer. Then we move before he does. But just as Ethan began copying the files, an alert flashed across the screen. Remote access detected. Someone was watching him, damn it, Ethan hissed, slamming the laptop shut. They traced me. Did you use a secure network? Sam asked sharply. I did, Ethan said, breathing hard. But Richard must have upgraded his systems. He knows someone was in his files. Sam extinguished the fire instantly, plunging the cabin into darkness. We need to move, now. They packed quickly, taking only what they needed. Outside, the rain had turned into a torrential storm. Thunder boomed across the valley as they ran toward Sam's truck. Where will we go? Ethan shouted over the wind. Sam started the engine. Someplace they won't look. Hours later, they reached an abandoned farmhouse near the edge of town. It was small, dusty, and half-collapsed, but it would do. As dawn began to rise, Ethan sat by a cracked window, watching the first light touch the horizon. His thoughts were with his mother. Was she safe? Did Richard suspect anything? He reached into his pocket and pulled out the scarf she'd left on his grave. The fabric was still damp, but its scent grounded him. He whispered, "Hold on, Mom. I'm coming for you." Sam came in quietly, holding a small box. "Here," he said, setting it down. "Found this among your father's things. Might help." Ethan opened it and found a flash drive labeled only with the words, "For Ethan when he's ready." His chest tightened. "My father knew this would happen," he murmured. He plugged it into his laptop. Inside was a video his father recorded years ago. The man's face was tired but kind. His eyes filled with the same fire Ethan carried now. "If you're watching this," his father said, "it means you found the truth. I always feared Richard would let greed destroy everything we built. Protect your mother. Protect yourself. And remember, Colin's blood doesn't bow to corruption." Ethan stared at the screen long after the video ended. Sam placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your father believed in you, kid. Time to prove him right." As Ethan began sorting through the new data, a sudden knock echoed through the farmhouse. Both men froze. Sam gestured for silence, pulling a gun from his coat. Another knock came, slow, deliberate. Ethan's pulse raced. Sam motioned toward the back door, whispering, "Out the back, go!" But before Ethan could move, a voice called from outside. "Mr. Collins? Are you in there?" Ethan's breath caught. It wasn't a threat, it was a woman's voice. Cautious but desperate, he crept to the door and peered through a crack. A familiar figure stood there, drenched from the rain, clutching something to her chest. It was Mrs. Jenkins, his mother's neighbor. He opened the door just enough to speak. "Mrs. Jenkins?" Her eyes widened. She dropped the umbrella in shock. "Ethan, oh dear Lord, it is you." Sam quickly pulled her inside and shut the door. "Keep your voice down," he warned. She looked between them, trembling. "Maria's in trouble," she whispered. "I didn't know where else to go. Your uncle's been visiting her every day, pressuring her to sign some papers. Last night, she told me she didn't trust him anymore. She said she was going to confront him. But this morning, her house was broken into." Ethan's heart stopped. "What, is she hurt?" "She's alive," Mrs. Jenkins said quickly. "But she's terrified. She said she found something that made her believe you might still be alive." Ethan exchanged a stunned look with Sam. "She knows," he breathed. "She found a clue." Sam nodded gravely. "That means Richard knows too." Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating the tension on their faces. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Ethan stood, determination hardening his expression. "I can't hide any more," he said. "If Richard's after her, I have to stop him." Sam placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Then we do it right. You have proof, you have allies, and now you have a reason. But understand this, Ethan. Once you step out there, there's no turning back." Ethan looked out into the storm, his reflection shimmering against the rain-soaked glass. "I'm not turning back," he said softly. "I already died once. This time, I'm coming back to live. For her." The storm raged outside as the two men prepared for what lay ahead. Somewhere in the distance, church bells began to toll, marking the start of a new day, one that would bring truth, danger, and a reunion written by fate itself. The morning sun broke through the clouds like a hesitant promise after a long night of storms. In the quiet neighborhood of Maplewood Lane, Maria Collins sat by her kitchen window, her fingers wrapped around a cold cup of tea she had forgotten to drink. The house felt too big now, too empty, its silence pressing on her chest like a weight she couldn't lift. For months, she had lived in that silence, surrounded by her son's memories, his books still on the shelf, his jacket still hanging by the door, his laughter echoing faintly in her mind. But today, something felt different. There was a folded piece of paper on her doorstep when she woke up. No name, no address, just 4 words written in familiar handwriting. "Don't trust your brother." Her heart had nearly stopped when she read it. She had recognized the handwriting instantly. It was Ethan's, every loop, every line. She had spent 24 years seeing that handwriting on birthday cards, sticky notes, and love you mom letters. She knew it as well as she knew her own heartbeat. But how could that be possible? Her son was gone, wasn't he? She tried to tell herself it was a cruel prank. Maybe someone wanted to give her false hope. But her instincts whispered otherwise. And now, as she stared at the paper on the table, she could feel something stirring inside her. A small spark of doubt mixed with a mother's intuition. The sound of a car engine outside broke her thoughts. Richard's black sedan pulled up to the curb, its tires crunching against the gravel. Maria's chest tightened. He had been visiting more often lately, bringing groceries, checking in, offering to help with the house. At first she had been grateful, but lately she had started noticing things. The way he asked about her bank accounts, the documents he wanted her to sign, the way his eyes darted toward the old photo of Ethan on the mantel whenever he thought she wasn't looking. A knock echoed through the hallway. "Maria?" "It's me, Richard." She hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. He smiled warmly, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. "Brought these for you," he said softly. "Thought they might brighten the house." Maria forced a faint smile. "You didn't have to." He stepped inside uninvited, his eyes scanning the living room with casual familiarity. "You look tired," he said. "You should let me take care of those bills we talked about." "You don't need to handle all this alone." Maria's voice trembled slightly. "I can manage. Ethan would have wanted me to be independent." Richard's smile faltered for a second before he recovered. "Of course. But Ethan isn't here anymore, Maria. You have to think about yourself now." Something in her chest twisted. She wanted to scream that he was wrong, that maybe Ethan was still here somehow, but she bit her tongue. Instead, she said quietly, "I'll think about it." Richard's gaze lingered on her for a moment, unreadable. Then he nodded, placed the flowers on the table and left without another word. As the car disappeared down the road, Maria's composure finally cracked. She sank into a chair, the note clutched in her hand. "Don't trust your brother." The words burned in her mind. Could Ethan really be alive? Could he have written this? That night, as the rain returned, Maria sat in her room, staring at an old wooden box she had kept hidden in the closet. Inside were Ethan's belongings from the crash, the charred wallet, the melted keychain, and a silver bracelet that had supposedly been found near the wreck. But something strange caught her eye this time, the bracelet's engraving. She ran her thumb over it and froze. It didn't read EC anymore. The letters were reversed, a clear sign that it was a duplicate. The original bracelet had been engraved by her own hand years ago, with a small scratch under the C. This one didn't have it. Her pulse quickened. The evidence before her whispered a truth she could hardly believe. The body they buried wasn't Ethan's. Her mind raced back to the car crash, to how quickly the authorities had arranged the burial, to how Richard had insisted she shouldn't see the body again because it was too painful. Tears filled her eyes as the truth started to take shape. "My son's alive," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He's alive." Suddenly a sharp noise shattered the quiet, the sound of breaking glass from the kitchen. Maria jumped, her heart pounding. "Who's there?" she called out, but there was no response. She crept down the hallway, her bare feet silent against the wooden floor. The kitchen window was shattered, the curtain fluttering in the cold wind. She reached for the phone, but before she could dial, a shadow moved behind her, a hand clamped over her mouth. "Don't scream," a voice hissed. Maria twisted, struggling until she recognized the man's face under the hood, one of Richard's assistants, a man she had seen once at the company Christmas party. "Where's the flash drive?" he demanded. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. He shoved her against the counter. "Your brother said you found something that wasn't yours." Maria's fear turned to fury. "You tell Richard he'll never get away with this," she cried. The man raised his hand to strike her, but before he could, headlights flared outside. Tires screeched. A second later, the front door burst open. "Step away from her." It was Sam. The old veteran stormed in, holding a flashlight and a revolver. The intruder bolted toward the back door, but Sam's voice thundered through the house. "Leave before I make you regret staying another second." The man fled into the rain. Maria stood trembling, unable to speak. Sam turned to her, lowering the weapon. "You're safe now," he said gently. "I'm a friend of Ethan's." The world tilted. "Ethan," she whispered. You know my son?" Sam nodded. "He's alive, Maria. He's been alive this whole time. And he's fighting to come home to you." Maria covered her mouth with her hands as sobs escaped her. "Where is he? Please take me to him." "Soon," Sam said softly. "But first you need to understand you're in danger. Richard and his men know the truth is slipping. They'll do anything to keep their secrets buried." He guided her to the couch, explaining everything Ethan had uncovered: the corruption, the fake death, the stolen inheritance. Maria listened in shock, each word unraveling the web of lies that had consumed her life. "I can't believe it," she whispered. "All this time Richard sat in my house smiling." "Pretending to care," Sam nodded. "He's desperate now. But Ethan has proof, enough to destroy them. He just needs you to stay safe until the time is right." Maria straightened, her grief giving way to strength. "No, I won't hide anymore. I'm his mother. If Ethan's risking his life to fight them, then I will too." Sam hesitated, seeing the determination in her eyes. "You've got your son's spirit," he said quietly. "All right then. But we need a plan." Before they could continue, Maria noticed something on the floor, a small envelope that had fallen from the intruder's pocket during the struggle. She picked it up and unfolded the paper inside. It was a printed email between Richard and Victor Hayes. Her hand shook as she read aloud. "She's starting to suspect." "Ended quickly before she talks." Sam's face hardened. "It's worse than I thought." "They were planning to silence you." Maria's breath came fast and shallow. "Then we stop them before they stop us." Later that night, Maria wrote a note and slipped it under her front door before leaving with Sam. The note was for Ethan, on the chance he came looking for her. It said only one thing: "Meet me where the bells never stop ringing," the church. The one where she used to take Ethan as a child, where the bells still rang every hour no matter the weather. It was their place, their secret corner of peace. Hours later, under the pale moonlight, she stood there alone, her coat clutched tight around her. The empty church loomed in silence, its stained glass windows glowing faintly with reflected light. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of candlelight made her heart race. She whispered into the stillness, "Ethan, if you're really alive, please come back to me." A sound echoed behind her, footsteps slow and deliberate. Maria turned, her heart leaping. A shadow moved between the pews, tall and familiar. "Mom?" The voice was soft, trembling but unmistakable. Maria froze. Her breath caught. "Ethan." He stepped into the light. His face was thinner, his eyes tired but alive. For a moment, time itself seemed to stop. Then she ran to him, her tears falling freely. "My boy," she sobbed, wrapping her arms around him, afraid he might vanish if she let go. "You're alive. My baby's alive." Ethan held her tightly, his own tears mixing with hers. "I wanted to come sooner," he whispered. "But I couldn't risk your life." "It doesn't matter," she said, clutching his face in her trembling hands. "You're here. That's all that matters." But the reunion was cut short by a sharp sound, the unmistakable click of a gun behind them. A cold voice broke through the stillness. "How touching," Richard said, stepping out from the shadows, his expression twisted with greed and hatred. "The prodigal son returns." Ethan pushed his mother behind him, eyes burning with fury. "It's over, Richard. I've got everything, the files, the evidence, your entire scheme," Richard smirked. "And who will believe a dead man?" Before Ethan could respond, Sam's voice echoed from the doorway. "I will." He stepped into the light, holding a recorder and a phone streaming live video. "And so will the world." Richard's expression shifted from smug to terrified. The sound of police sirens grew louder outside. Ethan's heart raced as his mother gripped his hand. "It's time," he whispered. And as the church bells began to ring, their deep chime filling the air, the truth that had been buried for so long finally began to surface. The air inside the church was thick with tension. The echo of the bells faded slowly into silence, replaced by the rhythmic thudding of rain against the windows. Richard stood frozen in the center aisle, his gun still raised, but his confidence slipping away with every wail of the approaching sirens. His once polished shoes now stood in puddles of candle wax, and the flickering light made his eyes look wild, cornered, like a man watching his empire crumble in front of him. Ethan stood protectively in front of his mother, his arm outstretched as if his body alone could shield her from every danger. Sam, steady and unflinching, held his phone high, the live stream broadcasting everything across social media. Thousands were already watching, commenting, recording. There was no turning back now. "You've got nowhere left to run, Richard," Sam said calmly. "The police are outside. The world's seen enough to know what you did." Richard's hand trembled slightly, the gun still pointed toward Ethan. "You think this will ruin me?" he spat. "You have no idea how deep this goes. I made this family what it is. Without me, you'd both be nothing." Maria's voice, though trembling, cut through the air. "You didn't make this family. You destroyed it." Richard's face twisted. "Destroyed it?" "I saved it. I cleaned up the mess Ethan made when he started digging into things he didn't understand. He was going to ruin everything." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You mean he was going to expose you?" Richard sneered. "You always were too idealistic. You thought justice mattered more than power. You thought truth could save you. Well, here's the truth, Ethan. I made sure the world thought you were dead, because that was the only way to keep you from destroying us all." Maria gasped, her knees nearly giving out. You faked his death? You let me bury an empty coffin?" "I did what had to be done," Richard snapped. "You were too fragile to know the truth." "No," Maria said, her tears falling freely. "You weren't protecting me. You were protecting yourself." The sound of footsteps echoed again, heavy, deliberate, as police officers burst through the church doors, their flashlights sweeping the pews. "Put the weapon down!" one shouted, but Richard didn't move. His eyes darted between the officers, the camera, and Ethan. "If I go down, he goes with me," he shouted, pressing the barrel of the gun toward Ethan's chest. "Don't do this!" Maria screamed, stepping forward instinctively. Richard's voice cracked, rage and desperation mixing in his throat. "You think you've won? You think anyone will believe your fairy tale about me faking deaths and stealing fortunes? You're a ghost, Ethan. You don't even exist anymore." Ethan took a slow step forward. "Maybe I don't, but you do, and the whole world knows exactly who you are now." In one swift motion, Sam lunged forward, striking Richard's arm. The gunshot rang out, deafening, echoing off the high ceilings, and for a split second, time seemed to freeze. The weapon clattered to the ground. Maria screamed. Ethan staggered back, clutching his side, but when Sam turned him over, there was no blood. The bullet had shattered a candle stand instead. The officers swarmed in, tackling Richard to the ground. He struggled, cursing as they read him his rights. His words dissolved into a bitter, defeated silence as the cuffs snapped shut. Maria collapsed into Ethan's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "It's over," she whispered. "It's finally over." Ethan held her close, his own tears mixing with hers. "No, Mom," he murmured. "It's just beginning." Outside, flashing red and blue lights painted the rain-soaked street in streaks of color. The crowd that had gathered outside the church erupted into cheers and cries of disbelief as Richard was escorted out, his face pale and hollow. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but for the first time Ethan and Maria didn't care about any of it. They stood together under the stone archway, holding hands as if afraid to let go. Sam approached them quietly. "You both need to come with me. There's still a lot the police will want to confirm. And Ethan, your identity's going to need to be reinstated officially." "You've been gone a long time," Ethan nodded. "I'm ready." Maria looked up at him, her fingers brushing the side of his face. "I thought I'd never see you again," she said softly. "Every day felt like a punishment." He smiled faintly. "I'd thought about you every night, Mom. You're the reason I survived." They left the church together, walking slowly into the rain. The storm that had haunted them for years was finally breaking, the clouds thinning just enough for the faintest streak of morning light to pierce through. Days later, the story had spread everywhere. News channels, newspapers, online headlines. Businessmen exposed for faking nephew's death in corporate cover-up. The evidence Ethan had gathered over the years, the financial records, fake documents and voice recordings, had torn open every secret Richard had tried to bury. His company collapsed, his assets frozen, and his name became synonymous with deceit and greed. Ethan, meanwhile, worked with investigators to rebuild his life. The world had thought him dead for years, but the truth now gave him a second chance. And Maria, though still shaken, found peace again for the first time in a long while. She sold the old house, too many ghosts lived there, and moved into a small cottage near the sea, where she could hear the waves instead of echoes of the past. One afternoon, she sat on the porch with Sam, sipping tea as the sunlight danced across the water. "You saved us," she told him. Sam chuckled softly. "No, Maria, you saved yourself. And your son saved the truth." Ethan walked up the hill then, holding a small wooden box. "Found this in the old storage locker," he said with a grin. He opened it to reveal the original silver bracelet, scratched under the sea, just as his mother remembered. Guess the fake one wasn't the only thing they couldn't bury. Maria smiled through her tears. "You kept it all this time?" He nodded. "It reminded me of who I was, and who I was fighting for." She took his hand gently. "Then don't ever let go of it again." That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan stood by the shore, staring at the waves. The wind carried the faint sound of bells from the distant church, the same bells that had once marked his return. He closed his eyes, remembering the promise he made to himself when everything began. "Truth never dies," he whispered. Behind him, Maria called out, "Come inside, Ethan. Dinner's ready." He turned with a smile, soft, content, at peace. The pain, the fear, the lies, they had all led here, to this moment of quiet healing. And as he walked toward the house, the light from the window fell across his face, warm, golden, full of hope. For the first time in years, he wasn't running from the past. He was walking toward the future.